Hello everyone and welcome back to Math for French Cars. In today's video I'm going to show you how quick and easy is to replace an alternator on this 2-liter HDI engine. We're going to be working on a Peugeot 407 with 2-liter HDI engine today, but the similar procedure would be for Citroen C5 and other vehicles equipped with 2-liter HDI engine. So the first thing to do is take your battery cover off and disconnect your battery, because we are gonna be taking off alternator and its electric component, so battery has to be disconnected, and it stays like that until we finish this replacement. Right, with a battery disconnected we can carry on. Right my guys, so as you can see here we have our alternator here, and alternator is hiding behind this little plastic here, which is actually there just to protect alternator from any leakage from the fuel filter in case it happens. Also this little hose here which goes through the side of it, this is a clear hose which is basically just leak of hose from the fuel filter. So what we can do here is we can undo these 3 T20 Torx screws, one here and one here, and we can actually remove this little plastic off the way. So that's what we're going to be doing now, just going to remove it out of the way. Okay, so what you can do now really is you can pull up this little hose here, and as you can see here, this thing, it just falls off. So we can just leave it somewhere here on the side in the bottom, just literally here somewhere, it doesn't really matter. Just leave it here for time being. And now as you can see, the alternator is exposed much more better, so we're gonna just take it from here. So the next step would be to disconnect 2 electrical connectors. One is hiding under here and is secured by 13mm nut, and another one is just simply here. And this one you can literally put your finger on the side here, prime the little clip and push it towards you, and it disconnects. So I just pushed this clip here, so that's one off. And another one, you wanna take this little rubber off here, off this place, and then what you're gonna be doing, you're just gonna take a 13 head, put on this nut and undo it anti-clockwise. And as you can see, the 13mm nut just literally came off. And what you can do now is a little connector here, you can just pull towards you, and that's your alternator disconnected. Next thing to do, here on the back of the alternator there is like a little plastic clip just securing a couple of the alternator cables in place. So what you want to do is you just want to unclip this clip, just to not to get in the way kind of thing, like this. So when you do that, it's just gonna pop nicely out, and you can pop it back in once the alternator is replaced. So now alternator is not connected by any electrical cables or anything like that. So the next step after removing all the electric connectors from the alternator is to remove your auxiliary belt. And to remove auxiliary belt, you're gonna have to release the pulley which tensions auxiliary belt. And all you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to use a 15mm spanner, put it on a nut which is located in the middle of a pulley, and then you're gonna have to turn the pulley anti-clockwise, and you will see pulley releasing a tension off the auxiliary belt. When that happens, we're gonna move auxiliary belt off the alternator. I'm just gonna show you how it's done now. Right, and we're just gonna leave this auxiliary belt just here for time being. It's off the alternator now, so it's not getting in the way. We don't want to take it off totally because it's gonna fall off the AC pump and the crank pulley, and then it'll be a extra headache for us. So we just leave it here for now where it is until we're gonna change our alternator. I'm just gonna show you how to secure it here as well. So what I'm doing here with my auxiliary belt, I'm not replacing it, I'm only replacing a alternator. So I'm just taking this hex key. There's a few holes here. I'm just sticking in a hole. So now, even with our alternator removed, my auxiliary belt is gonna stay pretty much in the same position. So once auxiliary belt is off the alternator and it's nicely secured in place, as you can see with a little hex bit, what I want to show you is you're gonna have 3 16mm bolts securing alternator in place, but there is also on the bottom right hand corner there is a little bit like this, which is secured by the metal plate and 5mm hex bolt in it. So I'm gonna be using one of these guys here, so just a ratchet with a little extension and CRV5 hex bit, and I'm gonna show you location of this bolt now. And I hope you can see it there between the bottom of the alternator and bottom of top of kind of boost solenoids. You can see that's the location of the bolt, and I'm gonna show you how to undo it now. Right, my guys, so I just want to show you something. The top bolts of alternator is going to be very easy to access and undo. That's not a problem. 16mm bolts. I'm going to show you how I'm undoing them now. But for the bottom one, which is actually there, as you can see, I'm pointing at it with this little hex bit now. That one, it's actually in a position where you cannot just straight away go and undo it. So I'm going to show you a little trick how to make yourself more space to be able to undo that bottom bolt. Right, so the next step is to actually undo the top 16mm bolts of the alternator, one in the front and one in the back. So I'm gonna just show you the back one. The location is just there, as you can see. That's the bolt, and I just use a spanner because this bolt tends to turn quite easy once it's undone a little bit. So I'm just undoing a tiny bit. And I can feel it actually spins really easy. So I'm just putting my hand there and trying to undo this bolt. Right, so as you can see, I've just undone the rear 16mm bolt from the top of the alternator, and now we're just gonna go and do the front one. And as you can see, the 16mm bolt out of the front of the alternator top is off as well. Right, my guys, so now with our top bolts of alternator off the way, what you can do, you can use something to actually prime the top of the alternator. I'm gonna try to show you as best as I can. So we are priming actually the top of the alternator to come a bit towards the front of the car. What this is gonna do is actually gonna allow us to reach that bottom bolt located deep there inside much more easier. So that's what we want to do for the time being. You just want to prime it up a little bit here, like this. Now don't push it too hard, because the alternator ends up sitting onto the boost solenoid for time being. But at least now you have a much better access to access your bottom bolt onto your bottom of your front alternator. Right, so we're just gonna remove the bottom bolt now. But once it's undone a little bit, this bolt should be able to come out quite easy actually. So we're just gonna try to maybe even, once it's undone, do it a little bit by hand. And the bolt of the bottom of the alternator is out as well. So what you want to do now, once all the bolt is pretty much off, the only one we left there is the low plate and 5mm hex bolt. You take your alternator, you move it a bit towards the side of the car while twisting it, and it nicely comes out of a place. As you can see here it is, it's off, and now you can see just the empty space where alternator goes in a place. Here we go. So that's our little metal plate still there. I didn't take this bolt out, I undone it and I just left it undone like halfway. So now we are ready to install our new alternator in. So while alternator is still out of its place, I just want to show you how this thing works. So as you can see, there is a crankshaft pulley and the belt goes around it. This is a AC pump and a belt goes around it. That's our pulley. And as you can see here, I have secured a belt with a hex bit in place here. So when I install my new alternator, everything is just gonna go nicely back on. Sometimes people make a big job out of a small job. They take a wheel off, they take a wheel arch liner off. You don't really have to. You can literally do it just like that, just through the opening your bonnet and doing a job. It's not a big deal. So now to install your new alternator in place is exactly the same procedure. As you can see, I can do with one hand. You just take alternator and you position it back in a place. You make sure that pin, as you can see there, I have a pin, goes nicely in its place, nicely there, and alternator is back in a place. So we're gonna have to do the bottom front bolt now and secure the bottom, and we will take it from there. So now I'm gonna install the bottom front bolt for the alternator. I'm just doing it by hand, the best way. So I'm just putting my hand here through the bit here, find the hole, stick the whole bolt through, and then I tied it with my hand as much as possible. As you can see, it's quite a way in already. Okay, that's it. Tie it up properly. So the next thing you want to do, once the bottom front alternator bolt is secured and tightened up, is to push the top of the alternator and line the holes up. There you go, and the holes has lined up now. So we're going to be doing top, front and rear 16mm bolts up. Now we're going to be inserting top front bolt, 16mm bolt in the top front of alternator and doing it up with a 16mm spanner. With our front alternator top and bottom bolts done up, we're gonna crack on and install this rear top bolt in our alternator. I'm gonna try to show you here. As you can remember, goes right on the top there, and normally it screws in nicely with hand, and then you just have to tighten it up with a 16mm spanner. So I'm actually going to use a ratchet and a head socket because I think this is going to be a bit faster. Nice and tight. And now we're going to do the bottom hex bolt holding the rear bottom of the alternator in place. Right, so as you could see, I've done all my alternator bolts up. What we're going to be doing now, we're going to be positioning auxiliary belt back onto the alternator. Just the one thing before we do that, you just want to make sure that your auxiliary belt sits nicely on AC pump, and it also sits nicely back there on crankshaft pulley. And then what you're going to be doing is we're going to be using the same 15mm spanner, which is still here actually, and we're going to be turning a nut on a pulley anti-clockwise once again and applying auxiliary belt back onto the alternator. So with one hand I'm holding my auxiliary belt, with another one I am turning my pulley anti-clockwise to release the tension of the auxiliary belt so I can position it. I do a first try and having a look, it looks like everything is right nicely in place, and it sits nicely where it should sit on my AC pump, sits nicely on alternator, onto the actual pulley and onto the crankshaft pulley. So the auxiliary belt has been placed back on with no trouble. So now I can take off my 15mm spanner off the pulley. There you go, I'll take that out. So the only thing I have left really to do here on an actual alternator is just connect it back on. So this bit is gonna go here. As you can remember, it's gonna be secured by 13mm nut, and we have this little clip we took off a side that clips back in. Connector here clips back in a place as well. We're gonna be taking our 13mm nut and doing it up in a second, and yeah, I'm gonna just do it now. Right, here we are. Just gonna tighten this up, tighten the 13mm nut nicely, not too tight, don't want to break nothing off. Now all the electric connectors are secured back on our alternator. Just put this little rubber protector back on it, and we're gonna be installing back again this one onto here, into this place now here. So So I just like to screw one screw in a little bit and then connect this little leak off pipe, and then we're gonna just use our T20 Torx bit to do the screws up. Okay, so a little shield here is back on, and the only thing now is left is to connect our battery back on, and we are ready to go. And with a battery connected back on, our job is now being completed. Now the car is good to go, and the alternator has been replaced. You could see how easy it is. The only tricky part of it was the front bottom bolt, but I did show you how to get more space to actually be able to undo it. This is like really painful, one of them painful bolts which is hard to access, but apart from that is quite a straight swap, straight bolt on bolt off job, which I believe most of you can really do it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you found it useful, please hit the like button, please subscribe my channel. We're trying to make this channel grow big, and thank you for watching. I hope you're gonna have a good rest of your week.